Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So a number of years ago, I began my High Holiday sermon with a joke that went something like this. There was a young rabbi who came to a synagogue, new rabbi, first job at a synagogue, first Shabbat, and he said, all right, my first Shabbat sermon, I want to talk about something really important. And so he created this amazing sermon about God and our relationship with God, and he gave it, and afterwards the president came to him and said, you know, Rabbi, there are a lot of people that don't necessarily believe in God. When you give a sermon like that, you may be alienating some people. You should probably try to be careful on that. Rabbi said, okay, that's good. Good advice. Thank you, Mr. President. So the second week, he said, okay, how about Shabbat? We're all here for Shabbat. I'm going to give a sermon on Shabbat and the importance of Shabbat. And lo and behold, the president said the same thing and said, you know, Rabbi, there are a lot of people that don't keep Shabbat. Maybe you shouldn't give such a strong sermon on Shabbat. You're going to alienate people. All right, so the third week he said, all right, I'm going to give a sermon on kashrut, on the laws of keeping kosher. He gave this great sermon on what it means to keep kosher. And at the end, the president said the same thing. Rabbi, a lot of people don't keep kosher. Maybe you shouldn't give a sermon on what it means to keep kosher. You may alienate some people. So the rabbi said, wait, let me get this straight. I can't speak about God. I can't speak about Shabbat. I can't speak about laws of kashrut. What should I speak about? And the president said, Judaism. So I don't have a president here to tell me not to speak about kashrut, and we are going to be reading today Leviticus 11, which is the foundation of the laws of keeping kosher. And so I want to ask the question today, what aspects of kashrut are still relevant to us today in the 21st century? A lot of people come up to me and they say, well, Rabbi, does this stuff really matter anymore? Why do we need to focus on this? Shouldn't we be focusing on things that are more spiritual as opposed to worrying about the things we can eat and the things we can't eat? What is the purpose of the laws of kashrut? And are they still relevant for us today? That's my question for us to think about. And I obviously have my opinion, which I'll share with you very shortly, but I'm curious to see what you all think. What is it, if anything, about the laws of kashrut that can still be relevant to us, can still teach us something for today? Judy.
Fish and other creatures that are bottom feeders in the ocean. You can only imagine what kind of unattractive are eating down there.
So Judy is saying that, you know, fish and certain things that are like bottom feeders and maybe birds that eat carrion, those sorts of things, not necessarily so healthy, right? We know today that shellfish, for example, are very susceptible to algae blooms, something called a red tide. They can make us very sick. So maybe, Judy is arguing, if I can broaden what you're saying, maybe there's a health reason for these laws that still is relevant for us today. Okay. March? Oh, nice. It makes us thoughtful about how we're using food, right, on how we eat. It creates a sort of mindfulness, if we can use that word. Today it's kind of a buzzword that nobody really knows exactly what it means to be mindful anymore. But yes, it focuses us. It brings intentionality to the food that we're eating. Good. What else? Why else might the laws of kashrut be relevant? Yes? I like that. It limits our consumption. I like the way that you said that, the hedonistic power, right? Look, every single animal eats, right? If you've ever watched, especially like a lion eat, it's not pretty. It's very similar to what we see in, summer camps in the mess halls, right? It's not pretty, right? But when we start to bring some intentionality, maybe we make choices about what we're going to eat, maybe we say a blessing before we eat, it changes that up and takes us out of that purely physical sort of moment and adds another dimension to it, like that. Good. Anybody else? Gary. Uh-huh. So there are certainly a lot of different layers of what it means to keep kosher, right? We've got this sort of first layer that Gary was talking about, or biblically kosher, which is basically what animals are permitted and then what animals are not permitted. And we have these signs that we're going to read through in terms that tell us which animals are okay and which animals are not. But then there's also other levels of, which by the way is also biblical, or at least a rabbinic understanding of the biblical verse, do not boil a kid in its mother's milk, separation between milk and meat, right? The dishes and all of that sort of things. Those are later rabbinic understandings of how to do this, So maybe there's a differentiation between biblical kosher and rabbinic kosher. Okay? Bob.
Well, on top of everything else, it serves as a 21st century connection to our forefathers.
I like that.
Where we can do something that they were talking about in the Old Testament.
Yeah. This is a connection to the people that came before us, right? We're eating the same way that they used to eat a long, long time ago. This Passover, I felt like as I was eating matzah, I actually was eating the same thing they were eating a long, long time ago. But they were eating the same way. Good. Anything else?
It's another way we distinguish or separate out Jewish people from everybody else. Belief in one God, Shema Yisrael, kosher laws, the way we dress. It just shows us we're a separate nation.
Yes, I like that. Separation. And it's a perfect segue to what I want to talk about. So if you open up in your Chumashim, which is the larger of the books that are in front of you, we're going to actually look at the very end of what Noah is going to read today. So the entire 11th chapter of Leviticus talks about the permitted animals and the forbidden animals, the land animals, the sea animals, the birds, creepy crawly things, everything. But at the very, very end, it gives a reason. So turn to page 642. 642. And you can look at the last couple of verses. Zot Tarat HaBe'ema va'of, these are the instructions concerning animals and birds and all living creatures that move in the water and all the creatures that swarm on the earth. Lehavdil bein hatameh ubein hatahor, to separate, to distinguish. It's the same word as Havdalah, right? The ceremony that we use at the end of Shabbat to separate between Shabbat and the rest of the week. These things are supposed to create a distinction, a separation in some way. So let's hone in on that a little bit more and try to understand what the Torah means here by a separation. Neil put forward, maybe this is a separation between us and the people who don't keep kosher. It's actually one of the things that we as a people struggled with, certainly in the modern world. It's actually one of the things that Reform Judaism, when they came out, they tried to remove some of those separations because they wanted us to be just like everyone else. Even in the conservative movement, we dress the same way that everyone else dresses. we speak the way that everyone else speaks. But there is a sense of this separation that the rest of the world is doing something and we're doing something else, and that's okay. That's okay. But what else might this separation be? What else might this separation be? What are we separating from by observing these laws of kashrut? Michal. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Most of the book of Leviticus that we're reading right now is about the priests, and it's about how they have this very exacting rituals of leading in the temple and all in the tabernacle, all of those sorts of things. So Michal is arguing perhaps this is a way for everyone, for all of Israel, to sort of feel like they're part of that, and to have that as part of their life in a way that they're able to do. Okay? Please.
I see it as particularly because it's to do with the priests, that we are all responsible for raising our efficacy and for being more responsible for acts of gemilut chesed and for, that it's not just specifically the priests, but it's our whole community that is expected to rise up.
Nice. So you're agreeing with Michal that this is a way to elevate the community and to make them so that everyone sort of has that high level of spirituality, perhaps. We're going to get back to spirituality in a second. Yes? It is. It's certainly, look, it's a way, this is not something that you typically learn in school, right? This is something you're going to learn as you grow up, right? You're going to learn as a kid in your kitchen. You're going to learn because your parents are saying you can eat this or you can't eat that. We're going to learn if we go out to a restaurant and say we can eat this and we can't eat that. It's not something that is an academic exercise. It's a daily life exercise. It's a daily life exercise, and to me, yes, makes you more self-conscious and more aware. And to me, there's a couple people here in my basic Judaism class, one of the things I talk about when I talk about kashrut, different mitzvot, different commandments, have different effects on us, right? Shabbat, for example, there's no mitzvah better than Shabbat to tell us the value of time, to teach us the value of time, and to remind us that if we don't carve out time for the things that are important to us, it won't be there, right? Shabbat does that very, very well. And I would argue there's no mitzvah quite like kashrut to remind us each and every day that we're Jewish. Because it's something that's always there in the background, right? It prevents us from saying being Jewish is like a hat we kind of put on sometimes. Okay, I'm Jewish now, I'm at shul, I'm at synagogue, it's Shabbat, I'm Jewish now, but then when I'm out and when I'm at my business lunch or when I'm going to this place or I'm going to that place, maybe yes, maybe no. But if we're always thinking about what we're eating, and frankly we eat all the time, right? Then it keeps that level of connection with us all the time as we go through. So that's one of the aspects of it. Anything else? How do we understand this verb, lahavdil? Between us and animals, or a difference between us and animals. It's interesting. I was reading a Dvar Torah written by Rabbi David Kornberg, a number of years ago. He titled it, Eating as an Act of Choosing, right? We kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, that there's an intentionality, there's a choice that we make. And he said something very interesting. He actually differentiates between Judaism and Christianity on this particular issue. He says, in the New Testament, it says, it's not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth, what you say, right? And he argues that Judaism actually brings it the other way as well. And what we put into ourselves has an impact on us. I remember growing up, and some of you who are my age probably have the same sort of memory of, you are what you eat. It's a kind of this ad campaign against junk food, right? You are what you eat. You shouldn't eat all of this junk food. Well, I'm going to argue we are what we eat in a spiritual way as well. If we eat food, for example, that has been mistreated, animals that have suffered, right? Animals that are not kept in a way that is healthy or that have experienced cruelty, we take that spiritual sort of flavor or taste into ourselves while we're eating that as well. And so the laws of kashrut allow us to say, what is it that we're putting into our body? Not because of health, right? Because by the way, let's be honest, if we were really talking about health here, especially in today's day and age, we certainly wouldn't be salting our meat anymore. Right? That's a part of what the Jewish practice of making meat kosher. It's soaked and salted. It's not necessarily the most healthy. So it's not about health. It's about holiness. It's about making a conscious, affirmative choice to say, how am I going to live? And I would argue, my friends, that whether you make that conscious, affirmative choice about kashrut or Shabbat or being Jewish or standing up for who you are or standing up for Israel, making those conscious, affirmative choices are part and parcel of what it means to be Jewish. And we learned that from here as a prime example. Any questions or comments before we actually read this parsha? All right, quick quiz. How do I tell if a land animal is kosher? 2 signs. What are they? They have cloven hooves and chew their cud, right? They ruminate. What about a fish or a sea creature? Fins and scales. What about a bird? Feathers. Well, some feathers yes, some feathers no. So birds are a little different. You're going to see when we get through here, they actually name the birds. And you will see as we read through today's Torah portion, one of my favorite words in the entire Torah is in this chapter, both in Hebrew and English. It's a particular bird called the duchifat, which I just love that name in Hebrew. And in English, it's the hoopie bird. So I like it in English too. So birds are specific. But yes, birds of prey, carrion eaters don't get eaten. What about creepy crawly things? None except for there's certain types of locusts actually that are kosher. And I don't know how many years ago was it, Rabbi Aaron? We remember there was every once in a while there's this locust swarm that comes from Africa and makes its way all the way up into the land of Israel. And I remember reading in the Israeli press how all of these chefs from the top kosher restaurants in Israel were out there catching crickets and things like that or these grasshoppers because they could finally serve it but any other creepy crawly things are not. So let's begin our Torah reading. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.